sleeps, pal.
Welcome to Money Never Sleeps, a podcast that looks inside the head of entrepreneurs and what makes them do what they do. A wise person once said, unless you're waking up in the middle of the night taking notes on your startup, that's not what you're cut out for. You don't pick your business idea picks you. How does this happen? And what keeps entrepreneurs going back for more? This is our second episode of Money Never Sleeps. For this episode, we had the pleasure of talking to Barry Brennan, the managing director of Cap F9, an advisory business helping founders fundraise and investors invest. A lawyer by trade, Barry had a long career in corporate and structured finance before making the leap as an entrepreneur in 2016 and hasn't looked back since. We touched on this during our chat, but when he's listening to you, it's like Barry breathes through his eyelids, like Nuke LaLoosh and the lava lizards of the Galapagos Islands. Not everyone will get this, but our American friends might. So, vamonos! All right, guys, here we are, Money Never Sleeps, live from Dogpatch Labs. This is our second episode, and we have here with us today Owen Fitzgerald to my right. Owen, say hello.
Hello.
And I'm Pete Townsend, and we have the pleasure of having Barry Brennan on with us today.
Gentlemen, hello.
Thank you. Barry, before we kick in, do you want to just give a brief overview of what it is that you do?
Good question. I guess my background is in law, corporate finance, innovation and technology. So what I do is take those 3 or 4 pillars together, add people into the mix, and then see what, I guess, value I can provide to people. So what does that mean? That means I'm working in areas I love. They're principally early stage tech funding, so investing in early stage, principally Irish companies, helping people, connecting investors into those companies, providing advisory support in fintech and financial innovation, and then there's even a few other verticals, but for one person, I think that's probably, they're the main verticals.
Why do you do it?
Because I love it.
Why?
I guess curiosity killed the cat, and that's kind of where I'm at. I love dealing with entrepreneurs, and that's a topic we'll talk about later, maybe about what it means to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But I'm fascinated by the kind of businesses and products that people are building here in Ireland. I came from an innovation background, a background of creating financial solutions, non-standard financial solutions, and meeting people every day doing that, it gives me huge energy, and that energy I hope to convert into giving value back somehow, and then hopefully make a reasonable living out of it.
I'm almost getting this immediately just by asking you these questions. The first time you and I met, we had lunch shortly thereafter.
I bought that lunch.
Is
this the payback?
This is a payback.
A restaurant that subsequently closed.
Yeah, we have no sushi on the table.
No sushi on the table.
And the way you're looking at me right now is the same way you were looking across the table at me that day, with some curiosity that you can naturally see in your eyes about what it is the other person is doing. I remember your line of questioning was totally proper line of questioning, but it was, you were naturally curious about what it is that I do and why I do it.
I still am, Pete. I still am.
You don't know what I really do, right?
No, and look, that is passion, and it's genuine, and I physically look different when I'm talking about the stuff I care about. And look, I came from big institutions, great institutions that were really good to me, great places to work. But it's hard to be very curious in a 200,000 organization or a 50,000 organization and actually try and take that and put something together. I know. Having listened to one of your first podcast with Brian, I guess you're talking about his love of Lego and some other topics. In the end, I guess that's what gives me energy here, is actually looking at people trying to build things and trying to make that happen, or make part of that happen, or be part of that journey. And then that brings you to lots of random places, including to, I guess, here today. So my day today has been about as random as it gets, and then now coming in for a podcast is a big part of that.
What moment in your life did you realize that this was what you wanted to do?
Oh, that's a good question. I describe what I guess what I do now was an output of what I call Brownian motion. So I don't know if there's any scientists listening. So Brownian motion is the random movement of a particle in an area, and I randomly moved in different areas before I found what I thought I really liked. And that took a long time, in part because I was looking for it. In part, I wasn't looking for it, but I wasn't necessarily happy where I was. And then trying to explain that to people who go, what do you do? So when people say to you, what do you do? I kind of say, well, these are the pillars around what I do, and then I let it bring me where that goes. And as long as I make a good living out of that, and I get energy, and I learn, and I'm pushing that curiosity, then I don't have a 5-year business plan. I have maybe end of next week.
Yeah,
and then I'll see how it goes.
Okay. And I think that comes into, you mentioned talking about an entrepreneur. Like, you obviously listened to podcasts we did with Brian, and it's clear from the outset he was an entrepreneur. He talked about doing it through college. But like, to us, you're an entrepreneur. You stepped away from the comfort of, the large institutions and that piece to go out on your own. You obviously work with entrepreneurs. You may not see yourself in the same light as when you're working with those people, but you are one.
And I didn't. When you said it, I thought the topic was on fintech or some of the other areas I absolutely love. When it was a topic of being an entrepreneur, I actually stepped back and I actually thought, well, what does that mean? I guess it's shoe leather plus passion plus ability converting into revenue. I guess doing it yourself and starting without a brand and building up from nothing.
Yeah.
So I guess I am that, and I love it. I think it's funny about. I was never a person that had a problem with bosses. Actually, I'm quite, show me where to shoot, I'll shoot within moral standards. Just looking at you, Pete, I know you're shocked by that.
Yeah.
But in the end, I think, it's not like I want to be my own boss. But the funny thing about being an entrepreneur, you kind of end up having 7 bosses if you want to. Because you could be serving lots of different masters, but there are people and companies that you want to work with, and that variety again comes jumping through for me.
Part of the reason that I started doing what I do is down to value system, right? I spent 21 years in the corporate world, kind of following the value system of others and trying to blend that in with my own to keep me sane. But eventually, enough was enough.
Yeah.
I could rattle off those values, but today is about you, Barry.
And I can rattle off coming from a corporate
tell us about
environment.
some of those internal values, those things that you believe in, that kind of come through in how you carry yourself on a professional basis.
Yeah, look, it's fun. I guess you have to start with transparency and honesty. I had a meeting earlier today, and when you're business developing, there's always a dance of what you can provide and what you can't provide, and you have to keep your funnel open in terms of leads coming in. But I'm usually I try and be fairly frank if I can help or if I can't help.
Yeah.
So I guess if I'm meeting early stage companies, I try and articulate where my sweet spots are, or for the investors that I work with, the sweet spots that they have. I'd rather give free advice than giving advice and charge that isn't of value. So if anyone ever comes back to me after and says, can I sit down for another hour and go through a pitch, I never say no at all, actually. And I tell people to do it, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But in the end, I think trying to be as transparent as possible and honest up front, I guess, is the core for me at the beginning. In the end, after that, it's where I add value. If the other side sees that there is a value, and then trying to come to an arrangement that makes it work. And as I say, because the word pivot is a new word for me in the last 2 years in the tech world, and I use that as an example because pivoting in a bank kind of meant you'd fucked up.
Yeah, it does.
Are you allowed to curse?
You can.
Yeah,
or cuss.
Yeah, go for it.
I was listening. I listened to loads of you guys say cuss. We must go through the origin of cuss and curse.
Yeah.
Anyway,
fuck, damn, piss, hell.
Yeah, they're all okay. So pivoting kind of means you've made a mistake, whereas pivoting here in working with tech companies, and I've kind of gone off, and I say I love learning. We talked about that. I've done a little kind of degree in technology at night, staying up with. I have 4 kids as well, or 4 kids. Owen has a few. You've a couple on your side as well. So trying to balance all that up. But in the end, when you look at Pivot and the companies and the entrepreneurs that we deal with, you have to change and adapt and make that work. That's not a mistake. Look, there's mistakes. Some people pivot because they've made a mistake, but if the market disappears, the product just isn't right.
Yep.
Not from your own your own fault. I think that's a fascinating part of the kind of journeys that these guys.
And I think it's very much a mindset in terms of like the types of people we meet regularly versus the approach to that, like, you know, in the corporate world or in a typical company. You know, as an entrepreneur, you are always of the mindset that you have to pivot or adapt to whatever comes your way. Like you're saying, you know, you don't have a 3-year plan or even a week plan, that sort of thing. Because
No,
it's just,
and I think one of the things I hadn't realised, so I'm two and a half years out of big corporate, I hadn't realised that, and I don't mean decontamination, there is a kind of a period where the use of the language that you use and how you say things is different. Now, and let me give you a real life example of that. There was some great accelerators here in Ireland. And I was at one recently, which was a combination of an internal accelerator and an external accelerator. So it was real young companies with kind of ideas, and then people spinning out from the corporate world of a big corporate, also taking those ideas and out of the corporate and trying to effectively spin them out. So people with the same objective, but talk totally differently. I was absolutely blown. I think I could have predicted 90% which were internal and external, not by the language. And so we straddle different spaces as you guys do. So we speak to big corporates, and I'm fascinated by that aspect of, I guess, I'm not sure, is it psychology, is it language, how that converts into innovation, coming from an innovative background in a big corporate. If I ever went back in, God help them.
It's hard to do.
But what would you bring differently, or is it different? You know, is it different? Does it have different outputs?
You know, my last year in the corporate world, I was spending a bit of time around here in Dogpatch Labs, talking to fintech to learn about it, to see what they were doing. I was the classical wantrepreneur. Or the startup tourist.
Were you an entrepreneur? There is the entrepreneur.
Yeah, of course, I was an entrepreneur. That was I had a business card before I started my business.
Oh, nice!
That
you had a brand.
Entrepreneur gone solo, right? Yeah, deadly. Yeah, I threw those business cards out pretty quickly. But in that last year that I spent, what I really started to understand was that there's a romance you got to start to lose around all this stuff, right? And that this is true business that's happening, and true business is taking place. No matter if it's happening in the electric environment of Dogpatch Labs, or it's happening in GEC, or it's happening anywhere around town. And it is much different from the corporate world. And for me, doing that was like a bit of a field trip. Right? And that I would come back and I would go back and do my day job, where there's a lot of political will in the corporate organization that governs how people do things and what they're allowed to do.
And I think if there are listeners out there who are entrepreneurs, whatever you are, in solo version, the Star Wars version, there's a few warning signals. So I stopped going to banking conferences and started going to the Web Summit in the good old days when it was here. And when you find yourself in different places, and I used to manage people, and I used to force them to do a course that was not relevant, deliberately not relevant, because if you're meant to, within reasonable bounds, but you know, if you're in innovation, you should be seeing parallel or vertical or alternative universes to understand how you can bring those back across. Yeah. And again, more and more, in a big bank, I found myself at the wrong kind of conferences. So I was allocating all of my training to non-core, which to me still makes sense in terms of, if you want to be in innovation, that's a legitimate strategy. But if you find yourself doing that, and through meetups and through all of the different ways you can think, find new things, find new areas to find out about. I think the world is full of, we could all be at meetups if we're not already at meetups. I see you talking at half of them, and then Owen is either talking or at the other half as well. And then there's the other 3 or 4 halves that we have to fit in.
And that's the thing, it's that range, as an entrepreneur, you're limited within your organization if you're in one as to what they expect you to look at. Like, I spent 2 years working with Brian Norton in Future Finance. I've always kind of lived by a particular quote to me from Bruce Lee, where it's use only that which works and take it from where you can get it. Like, be open-minded to everything.
Yeah.
One of the things we did in Future Finance in terms of engaging with companies or the people that we needed to approve, like loans, because we did online lending, was an idea that I saw in the book about the guy who founded IKEA. And initially when they started off, they hand wrote notes to everybody to say thank you for, purchasing something. So we did that to the people who were approving the loans in the universities, and we said, thanks for approving it. It built our brand name and that recognition, and the guys on the other end of those notes were civil servants working in the university. They were getting this note from like a CEO telling about, thank you for helping this person get through university. And it added such value then to them, and it made them obviously more acceptable to working with us.
Hey, thank you goes a long way.
Yeah,
It does.
But again, it was
Big
something
style.
that was from an area totally unrelated to finance, But again, it was with a view to keeping your mind open to everything. And we see that being outside of your corporate world then.
I had a very nice experience the other day with a startup in Dogpatch, where we met. And I'm not sure if I can help them. They have some great products. It may work. And he said, I'm going to send you a note afterwards to say thank you. And I said, God, that's nice. Because it doesn't happen that often, actually.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying everyone's out wanting to say thank you. Usually if I meet somebody random, I'll send them a note saying, that was cool, thanks.
Yeah.
That was good.
People should, I encourage that, right? Like, I got a thank you card in the post from someone that I said no to about going to do an event for them. Because of the economics of it, right? And he said thank you anyway with a card, and I was totally impressed.
It's maximum impact. And there is a book called What Color is Your Parachute?
Yeah.
It's a real old book, and this isn't about changing careers or anything, but I have 3 editions starting back in the 90s. And that's, a map of how you want to plan your career, but also in it is an old-fashioned send people a kind of handwritten card. Is if you're interviewing, it's an old tactic, not interviewing but you want a job, which is a very informational interviewing. That's an old tactic to use. So again, but that's a personal touch. But I'll remember. Actually, he said he's going to send me something. I said, don't bother sending me it now. I know you were going to send me a note, but he sent me a note anyway. And I think I'll remember that. And whether that matters, but in a community like Ireland, even in the tech community globally, you're in London, I'm in London, I'm in Bristol next week. This is a very small, very small world.
Yeah, and those things can keep you going. What else keeps you going? Who do you lean on?
That's a good question. I guess as a sole entrepreneur, is that what you called it? A solo. I'm kind of.
Yeah.
In the end, it's family. I think it's old-fashioned. My wife. I've a wife and 4 kids. My son starts to do my PowerPoint now. He's getting good at that kind of stuff.
Brilliant.
Again, I don't pay him. Actually, I get paid for the grass, but not for the PowerPoint, because I think he's learning for that. I think that's principally it. That and mentors. I've always deliberately sought out mentors.
Yeah.
And again, usually older people in different areas, although I have an idea of a millennial mentor now. So I bring one of my nephews for a pint to see what it's like to be a young person and how he's connected digitally and has no personality. But apparently millennials do have personalities.
They do.
And they're not on their phone all of the time. But out of a conference you might have at Minovate or one of the other conferences, the whole millennial thing came out, and it comes and goes, I guess. But if you're in certain areas, you have to understand this thought process. So I have what I call older guys who've crustier, been around the block a bit.
Yeah.
So even on my own, I'll go for coffee with them, and most of these guys will never say no. Very few people will say no to being a mentor, to be honest. You don't even have to properly ask them to be a mentor. But that's so beyond my long-suffering wife. Those kind of mentors of guys who've been around, not to ask them to help, but just to kind of bounce stuff off.
Yeah.
And my millennial mentor, Daniel. So shout out to young Daniel.
There you go. That
Brilliant.
helps. What about if you think about over the last even month, what is the single biggest thing that you're the most proud of that you've done over the last month?
Oh, that's. Yeah, look, I guess a few things have fallen into place in terms of lead times when you're on your own are very long, spectacularly long. And a couple of things have come in which I was happy about in terms of on the advisory side that have come in terms of from a kind of a real work perspective. I think that's probably the main side. Nothing kind of hugely magical, but these incremental things make a big difference to where you are at capacity. As I say, when you're starting without a brand, you're trying to build your own brand. I did my own website. It's like the what's the Little Britain sketch where it's sing the theme tune, write the theme tune. It's is it Waterman from Minder? It's a bit like that. And I said I've done some tech stuff, so I'm gonna learn Wix. I'm gonna do it myself, even though it's a shit website, capf9.com. But it's the best I can do. I have the same picture of the bridge here in Dublin, which I'm gonna get a proper picture from my one of my. Everyone has the same bridge, and I seem to have picked a really shitty bridge for $4 from one of the mass production picture sites there. So I will have a better picture on the website if anyone checks in, and my Google Analytics will keep an eye.
A few new buildings going up at the end of the Keys there.
We need some new stuff. We need some new images for Dublin and tech. I think that's it. But you guys can build that.
All right, cool.
What is it that people would not expect to know about you?
Yeah, I love music, and if it's got a string and it's not a violin, I'll give it a go.
Rock and roll, baby.
Rock and roll. I was in a band called Mechanical Death as a child.
Okay, this is
kind of slightly, we split up because of musical differences, and I went the folk route. It's a tragic story.
What did you
Our
play?
drummer blew up as well. That's stealing that from Spinal Tap. That's for references out there. No, so I play a lot of guitar, mandolin, ukulele, banjo, bouzouki, banjo-tar. I've got a suite of that I don't play very well. So I kind of you could say I play - collect instruments I can't play.
Okay.
That's
pretty
cool.
In our first episode, Brian Norton said he was in a band as well. We never got the
lead
name,
singer,
but Mechanical Death.
We went through a few names.
That is cool.
We were the Tchaikovsky with Russian influence as well, where I had a kind of a fur coat and some fruit on the floor. None of it made sense. We even had dry ice at one of our events, but then we had somebody with an axe. You forget when you have dry ice, if there's any budding rock stars out there, that if you have dry ice, you need a machine. If you don't have a machine, you need an axe. So we had our band, which wasn't really very good. You could hear a thumping noise of somebody, probably not with gloves, handling dry ice and throwing it out onto the stage.
Is it out there on YouTube anywhere?
There's one damning sequence at my wedding my brother played, but it's VHS. So it's not.
We'll never see it.
Gotta get that.
I still have one VHS. I still have a video recorder somewhere that could play it, but I don't think anyone else does, and I'm definitely not digitizing that.
Yeah.
It's not good.
I'm glad
It's
no
not
one
good.
ever recorded anything that I did.
So I guess that's something most people. But maybe everyone in Ireland. In the 80s, 90s, kind of was in a band. That was kind of what was happening.
No, I think it's safe to say that I've never been musical in any way. Now, all of my kids are musical. My wife is incredibly talented. I haven't a note in my head, nor any concept of it.
Didn't stop us. Didn't stop me. Didn't stop me.
I do my best, but I try not to. All right.
Listen.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting.
Really appreciate you coming on, and we'll see you soon.
Another note in my random life. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Best
Thank
of
you.
luck with the project.
Great.
We'd like to thank Barry for opening up his mind for the second episode of Money Never Sleeps, a podcast brought to you by Owen Fitzgerald and me, Pete Townsend. All that we ask is that when you speak of us, speak well. We'd also like to thank Gav Timlin and Conan Brophy from Create Sound for recording and editing this podcast. Finally, thanks to Dogpatch Labs for hosting us and for their unwavering support of the startup community in Dublin. Goodbye.
Money never sleeps, pal.